So, welcome. And in this video, we're going to cover some of the more advanced options that you can find under the Open UV editor. Okay, so when you look at the UVs, for example, you can see that this is the space that we are going to be working with. And like I said before in previous videos, this space in between the UVW editor that's going to be the space where the map goes. So everything that you unwrap is going to fit within that space. If you look around this menu, a lot of the options that are both in this screen are also going to be available in this one. For example, some of the scaling tools, some of how to switch between modes. So in practical use, let's say you have a huge UVW unwrap you got to work on. Within this screen is where you can use a lot of these tools, for example, to be able to work with the UVs and such. So let's go ahead and cover some of the basic tools you're going to be using. First one is the obvious one. It's going to be the movement one. The movement one is the one that obviously lets you move the mesh. Rotation allows you to rotate the mesh. Scaling allows you to scale it. And just like the regular scaling menu, there is also a non-uniform scale, so you can scale along horizontal or vertical. The freeform mode is going to let you scale the whole mesh within sort of like within one as a whole, so you can select the corner. As you can see, you can free scale it to that degree. It's good to, for example, when you're done your unwrapping and you finish it, you take it within that space, and then like that you can fit it into the space. And then this one right here lets you mirror the selected geometry. And how this is going to be useful in terms of practical use, sometimes when you unwrap an item, some of the UVs are going to be flipped to the wrong orientation. So whenever you get to the point where you have to stitch or weld these UVs selected, when you do that, it's going to weld it into itself, which is going to give you overlapping UVs. So to fix that, one of the things you have to do, for example, is take your polygons and flip it into the correct orientation and then try to re-weld it again. So it allows you to actually weld it into the correct orientation and maintain the proper coordinates. So then what do we have after that? When we have edit, here is where we have a lot of different modes that are very useful. We have the shortcuts to the different modes here, like W is mood. Some reason doesn't work, I don't get it. But then some of the useful ones, for example, copy. What does copy do? Copy allows you to take the UVs from one space, and then when you select the other polygon, you can go and then paste it onto it. This could be useful, for example, if you have to paste that one same detail in a texture to the same polygon over and over. If you do copy and paste, you can keep copy and pasting and do a task that can take a long time and do it very easily. Paste weld, which means that whenever you paste something on top of each other, it welds on top of it, welds to each other to itself. Haven't used that much, but I have an idea it can create problems. But for the most part, I use paste because paste is much more simple. At least if I want to keep the UVs separate, if I want to do something different with them. And then we have select. Here we have another useful one. Here you can have a different variety of selections based on the situation. Probably have to go and try and experiment with yourself. But my favorite, for example, that I like to use is select overlap polygons. Because what that lets you do is it lets you choose what polygons are overlapping on each other. And the thing about unwrapping stuff in 3D Studio Max is, and when it comes to games, if you have overlapping UVs, they can play with your light map and give you a lot of errors, or they can give you unnecessary distortions or issues with your textures that you do not want to have towards the final product. So when it comes to how you would practically use this, after you're done with your unwrap and you placed it onto your sheet and you think it's ready to go to Photoshop, it's best to go and see if select overlap polygons occur. And if that's the case, that means that you've made some sort of error on your unwrapping, and you should find out where it is and fix it. Tools over here is where we're going to get a lot of that are some of the similar tools that we have right here in the inventory. That's the mirror, that's the transform. So the flip vertical, flip horizontal, mirror horizontal, mirror, and the mirror vertical have the same functionality in the menu. And then you have well selected. And how does well selected work? That's what you would use if you have vertices, for example, that you want to make as one. So as you can see, this right here is completely green because it means that there are seams here, there, there, and there. So if you want to take this, and as you can see here when I selected, that blue means that these two pieces are two that can be welded or stitched together. So if I want to go and weld together, I will go ahead and take this geometry, and just a little pro tip, if you click on the snaps toggle, it lets you snap your vertices within the UVW space, which is very useful for the need of accuracy. So I will go and click on the magnet, which is snap toggle, take this and then snap it to the corresponding piece. It looks good. And then after that, if I select the two pieces and then I say tools, weld selected, as you can see, the green line now has welded the two pieces together, and that right there has taken that seam out of it. So if you want to take whole UVW spaces and stitch them together, that would be the place to do it. Another one that's also very useful, for example, is going to be the stitch selected, which is another variation of that, and I believe that one works on edges. So let's say we have these two right here, which we want to use as a test piece. We want to break them apart from the mesh, from the unwrap. So how do we do that? We go to tools, we do break, and when you do break, it separates that UV from the space. So that's useful if you want to separate an element and remap it somewhere else. So let's say for the sake of argument, we take this one right here, this polygon, we go tools, break as well, separate it to the side. If I come here and I do tools, stitch selected, it's going to go ahead and select the corresponding edge and stitch it together. This right here, these little, before it actually stitches it, this is one thing that you're going to have to play around with. The bias is going to affect how much the corresponding piece that gets stitched or the one that's stitched on distorts when you stitch it. So if you raise and lower the bias on some of these, and you can't see the effect sadly now, sometimes there's going to be a distortion whenever you stitch two things together. So when you do, and you can see that your original unwrap has been distorted when you stitch it to another element, you have to take and raise and lower the value and see that the deformation is to a minimum, so you have the least amount of deformation in the UV space. Some of the other items that are useful is detach edge verts. That's where another form of breaking an object, where you can select the vertices on a polygon, hit detach, and you can pull out that polygon based on the vertices. Stitch selected, pack UVs. This is another useful one right here. Let's say you have a whole mesh and you want to take all the elements and put it into the UVW space and fit it in. If you do pack UVs, for example, it's going to give you the padding, which is going to be the distance between each other, and some of these other options sort of affect how the mesh is packed into the UV space. So let's just, for shits and giggles, go ahead and try it, hit OK, and then as you can see now, the whole thing is packed together into the UVW space. So it kind of forces all the UVs together and it lets you choose the space between it, but it takes a little bit of adjusting once you do it. So for example, if you unwrap your model and everything is to the right proportion, then you hit pack tools, pack UVs, and it'll put it into a basic configuration. And from there, you can go ahead and start fixing it into place. You see some of the other ones that are useful, for example, mapping. This is another one right here. Flatten mapping is going to take all your elements and it's going to go ahead and flatten it and separate it so every single element has its own unique and proper mapping. Again, this gives you the options of how much it flattens, the spacing between each other's pieces. So for example, if I hit OK, it's separated and took all the elements and sort of unwrapped the elements that seem to work the most together and some of them separately. So a good way to use, for example, this tools, mapping, flatten mapping. If you want to, for example, sometimes if I want to do something that's a little bit more complex and that I know normal wrapping methods are not going to be accurate enough, if it's going to give me distortions. So what I'll do is I'll just flatten the whole thing and then I'll take all the little elements together and then I will start to, for example, stitch it all together like that. So I can get all the pieces unified in the correct fashion that I want. Some of the options, other options that are useful as well in some of the mapping options, that's where you can load that's where you can load the default preferences for your UVW unwrap. And display right here, let's see, that's where you can choose to hide elements, for example. So if you have something you want to see, you go to display, hide selected, and then it takes that those UVs out of your way so you don't have to see it. That's one way. You could also unhide it. You could also freeze it. So if you want to leave something in the UV space where it's you know, if you have a UV that you unwrapped and you like the way it is and you don't want to accidentally mess it up, if you freeze it, then that means that you can never actually touch that until you unfreeze it. So it means that it leaves the areas that you're happy with untouched and untouchable so you can do the rest of it, because sometimes you can be careless and you could accidentally unwrap something in a polygon you accidentally selected. Something like freeze selected would help you to freeze the elements that you don't want to have be touched after you've done with it. And then the next would be view, and that's where you have some of the basic options like panning, some of these right here, for example, panning, zoom in and out, zoom into a specific area. This one right here is zoom extent all textures, so you can see the whole texture as a whole. And then this one right here is going to be another useful one, snapping, which is where you can snap vertices together. All these right here are the same welding options and stitching options that you would find along the tool menus. So at some point, once you start to figure out how to stitch, weld stuff together, you could probably just do it here quickly in the menu instead of having to go up here to find it. So everything, for example, like the stitch menus here, explode is one way to take a mesh and break it apart, breaking. So all these right here have to do with how you go ahead and put together the UVs and such. Down at the bottom here, we have the shortcuts for the vertices, which again, if you want to go to vertices mode, if you want to see that, that's useful, of course, if you're working in full screen and you don't want to have to take the zoom off of that and click on this to change it. As you can see, there's edge, and then there's polygon, and then this one right here just in the main menu is element. So if when you click on that, then you select the whole element or the whole mesh. This one right here is again one of the ones that you see in the main menu, which is the grow selection. So you click on that, it grows the selection, and if you do it, it shrinks it. And then this one right here, for example, if you take one, it takes this one right here, it takes two always selected, and then when you click on it, as you can see, it loops towards a certain direction. So if you click on, for example, these four, and then you hit loop, you can see that what it does to your mesh. So these right here all have an impact on how much it grows or shrinks. And these right here, same thing. You select the direction, it will ring it in one direction. You select that one, and it can grow the size of the selection. And then this one here allows you to paint the selection, I believe. So if you want to do very specific areas, that's what you can choose for that. And this right here and makes the brush size bigger, so you can paint more or shrinks it. Okay. So when it comes to some of the display menus, these are going to be also the ones that you're going to be using often as well. This one right here, for example, if you, where's it at? If you want to take, for example, if you select this element right here, if you go here, it locks it, which means that it locks those UVs. So no matter what you do, it's going to stay locked. Useful sometimes. This one right here, if you don't want to hide elements and you just want to work on specific UVs, for example, you take this, display only selected polygons, click, and then you could just work in those ones. And then if you want to do very specific work in one area of your mesh, and then if you click it again, it'll show it. And this one, what does this one do? Hide selected sub-object. And that hides it just like they have in this menu, which is the display hide selected. So as you can see, all of these items on the menu that you're going to use to do UVs are going to be available right down here to some degree. Let's see, what's this? I have no idea what that is. I don't think I've never used it. And some of these are soft selection. And some of these are the more specific selection tools. I haven't used them much, but if you're interested, give it a look. The stuff that I taught you is going to be the basic tools that you're going to be using. When you're done with this video, go ahead and talk to me if you have any questions. I can help you show an example how some of these are useful. And that concludes this. Oh, sorry. Before I conclude it, one more thing. And then when it comes to here, what does this do? That displays how is it your UVs are mapping together. So if you have a tileable texture, you can see the whole tile here if you click that off and on. This right here shows you the displayed texture if you want to see it. This lets you choose the space where the UVs are drawn in. UV is the basic one, and then VW and UW. So if you want to go vertically and horizontal, you can do it with that. And this one right here is also an important menu. This one lets you choose all the different colors for your display. So if you want to change your line color, for example, your seams, if you want to make your seams purple, if you want to show the grid in the scene, for example, And this right here, for example, and I will show you later when we get to it, this is where you would set the parameters whenever you are going to render the image of your UVs that's going to be to your template. So if, let's say you're going to do 2048 by 2048, this is where you set the output. And then, for example, then if you hit, you should have one here where they render it. But anyway, that's stuff that we're going to cover later. But so these are the basics. This one right here allows you to tile the bitmap, allows you how many tiles you want to have. So if you're going to do some tileable texture stuff, this is what would control all the control aspects of the UVW space. So I think I've done the basics. We're going to cover more of it when we do some more hands-on stuff, but this gives you an overview of all the basic functions of the UVW Unwrap. There's a lot of stuff I understand, so some of it you're probably going to find useful, some of it not. Just take your time in the future, get it, learn it, and it'll help you how to unwrap quicker and faster, and that's something you're going to be grateful for because unwrapping is the worst thing you can do as a 3D artist. That concludes this video. In the next video, we're going to do a little something more hands-on to show you how to start to stitch UVs for an object together. That concludes the video.